The city never sleeps. Neon lights reflect off glass towers, streets buzz with ambition, and the skyline seems to stretch forever. Yet inside one of those gleaming towers lived Derek Malone, a man who owned more than most people could dream of, but felt emptier than anyone could imagine. To the world, Derek had it all. Billions in the bank, a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, and a name that opened doors everywhere he walked. But behind the perfectly tailored suits and the champagne flutes, Derek carried a secret that no amount of money could fix. Before we continue, make sure you hit that subscribe button if this is your first time on Top Core. You don't want to miss the next jaw-dropping emotional story. He had tried everything. Hundreds of doctors, specialists from every corner of the world, experimental procedures, therapy sessions that cost more than some people made in a lifetime. And yet, Derek remained broken in a way no prescription could heal. It wasn't just about his body, though that was part of it. It was the constant, gnawing feeling that he had failed, that he was incomplete. The women, the parties, the fame, none of it touched the hole inside him. Tonight, his frustration boiled over. He sat in his penthouse, a half-empty glass of whiskey trembling in his hand. The city lights flickered through the glass, but for Derek they offered no comfort. He thought about the gala last week, where he had been forced to announce yet another failed procedure in front of an audience of peers and journalists. The humiliation still stung. Everyone laughed politely, some whispered behind their hands, and he smiled as if he didn't care. But inside, every word felt like a knife. Derek's assistant had called hours ago, reminding him of the emergency meeting with yet another doctor claiming to have a miracle solution. Normally he would have canceled, but something in him, a mix of hope, desperation, and stubborn pride, made him agree. He had tried miracles before and been burned every time. But tonight, he convinced himself maybe it would be different. As he left the penthouse, Derek's mind wandered through the failures. He had spent millions, flown across continents, and endured every possible treatment. None worked. He had always been a man of control, a man who solved problems with logic, power, and money. But now, there was a problem he couldn't solve. And that made him furious. By the time he reached the streets of Harlem, Derek felt both irritated and intoxicated, not just from the whiskey, but from sheer frustration. The bar he wandered into was nothing like his usual haunts. The lights were dim, the music thumped through the wooden floorboards, and the air smelled of smoke, perfume, and something raw, something real. It was the kind of place that existed in a world he had long ignored. He was supposed to meet a doctor here, someone claiming to have groundbreaking methods, but the appointment had fallen through. Alone, irritated, and unwilling to admit he felt a twinge of loneliness, Derek almost turned back. That's when he saw her, Selena Royce. She laughed, loud and unashamed, at a joke someone in her group had made. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, her posture relaxed, and something about her presence made Derek stop dead in his tracks. She was nothing like the women he knew. No designer gowns, no rehearsed smiles, no polite deference to his wealth. She was herself, unapologetically. Derek, already unsteady from the night and the day, bumped into her by accident, spilling a bit of his drink across her sleeve. Normally, a woman would have screamed, scowled, or demanded compensation. Selena. She laughed. Not a quiet, polite laugh. A full, infectious laugh that filled the room and somehow made the weight in Derek's chest lift slightly. "Watch where you're going, fancy man," she said, still smiling. He muttered an apology, embarrassed, but the truth was, he didn't want to leave. He watched as she moved through the crowd, confident, aware, untouchable, in a way he had never seen before. That night, Derek didn't know it, but he had just met the only person who could make him feel human again. He ordered another drink and stayed, pretending to check his phone, but all his attention was on Selena. He noticed small things. How she noticed a man trying to pickpocket someone. How she gave a kind glance to a child outside the bar window. how she didn't flinch at him or his money. She was real, and real was dangerous for a man like Derek. By the time the night ended, Derek left the bar not with answers from a doctor, but with an unfamiliar feeling, curiosity, fascination, something that made him forget, if only for a moment, all the failures, all the doctors, all the money he had wasted. And as he stepped back into the cold streets of New York, the wind hit his face, and for the first time in months, he felt alive, though he didn't yet know why. If this was your first time on Top Core, subscribe now, because stories like this one are not just about drama. They're about life, lessons, and the kind of human truths that no one else will tell you. And right now, Derek's life was about to take a turn that no billionaire, no doctor, and no procedure could have predicted. The question lingering in the air: who was this woman, and why did she make him feel something he had long forgotten? Derek Malone woke the next morning with a dull ache in his head and an unfamiliar restlessness in his chest. He had spent hours replaying last night's encounter with Selena Royce. Her laugh, her confidence, her indifference to wealth. Everything about her was a puzzle he couldn't stop thinking about. And yet part of him hated the thought. He had a system, a life, a schedule, and this unpredictable woman didn't fit any of it. He tried to push her from his mind, focusing instead on the stack of doctor reports that awaited him in his office. Page after page of failed treatments, costly experiments, and medical jargon designed to sound promising but meant nothing. Derek had consulted more than 100 specialists from around the globe. Some had been brilliant in their field, others charlatans, but the result was always the same: disappointment. Derek's impotence was not just physical. It was a reflection of every failure he had ever suffered. Every broken relationship, every misstep in business, every time someone laughed at his expense. It had all built up inside him, forming a wall he could no longer scale. He had tried therapy, experimental surgery, and even alternative treatments that promised miracles. And yet, nothing worked. Not a single doctor could reach the core of the problem. As he stared at his reflection in the office window, overlooking the streets below, Derek realized something frightening. He was running out of options. Money, power, influence. None of it mattered. The city, with all its chaos and opportunity, suddenly felt like a giant cage, and he was trapped inside. But it wasn't just about failure. It was isolation. Derek's assistants managed his calendar, his lawyers managed his lawsuits, and his doctors managed his body. But no one managed to touch his heart. No one had ever really seen him. And for someone who controlled everything else, that was unbearable. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the skyline. Everyone envied him. They wanted to be him. But he envied something they would never understand: the ability to feel normal again, to feel human. And then he thought about Selena, the woman from last night. She hadn't cared about his money. She hadn't cared about his name or his title. She had looked at him like he was just a man, not a billionaire, not a failure, and for reasons he didn't yet understand. That terrified him. Derek spent the next days trying to convince himself it had been a coincidence, a fleeting encounter he would never see again. But he found his thoughts drifting back to her at every turn. At the office, in meetings, even during calls with his lawyers, Selena's laughter and the sharp edge of her eyes kept intruding. He realized something else too. He wanted her. Not for money, not for power, not for the illusion of intimacy he had chased with every high-priced escort and socialite. He wanted her because she made him feel alive again. That was terrifying. Derek Malone, the man who had conquered real estate, politics, and society itself, was powerless over a single human emotion. Meanwhile, Selena Royce was living her own battles. She noticed the man who had followed her last night and dismissed him as just another wealthy fool. But there was something different in his eyes, something broken. And broken people intrigued her. They required attention, yes, but they also revealed truth. She had seen enough lies in the streets to know when someone's pain was real, and Derek's was unmistakable. The contrast between their worlds could not have been greater. Derek lived in a world where problems were solved with money. Selena lived in a world where survival depended on wit, courage, and the ability to trust no one. Yet somehow, fate, or chance, had put them on the same path. Derek's obsession grew. He started showing up at the same neighborhoods, visiting bars he normally wouldn't enter, hoping for another glimpse. He told himself it was curiosity, or research, or even charity. But deep down, he knew it was something else. Hope. Real hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find something no doctor had ever been able to give him. And that hope carried a price. Derek's elite circle noticed the shift in him. Colleagues whispered behind his back. Friends doubted his judgment, but he didn't care. He had experienced something authentic, something unfiltered, and for the first time in years, that mattered more than money, power, or reputation. As Derek waited outside a bar one night, staring at the neon lights reflecting off puddles in the rain, he felt the first spark of possibility. Maybe the world wasn't as empty as he thought. Maybe there was someone who could heal him in ways he hadn't imagined. And then, just as the rain began to fall heavier, a figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, confident, moving with a rhythm that didn't belong to the city's chaos. Selena Royce stepped out, looking directly at him as if she knew he would be there. The city hummed around them, but in that moment, nothing else existed. Derek's heart raced, not from fear, but from anticipation. Something had begun, something neither of them could predict. The question lingered in the air, heavy as the storm. Could this connection survive their worlds, or would the weight of society, pride, and fear crush it before it even began? New York City had a rhythm that only some people truly understood. The wealthy saw the sparkle, the lights, the endless opportunities. The poor saw the grind, the danger, the need to survive each day. Selena Royce lived in the latter world, though she carried herself like she could conquer any obstacle thrown her way. She had been 15 when life first taught her that no one would rescue her. Parents gone, streets cruel, shelters unsafe. She learned quickly, if you didn't watch your back, someone would make you pay for every mistake. By the time she was 21, Selena had survived beatings, thefts, and betrayals that would have broken most people. She had no illusions about the world, and yet, she also had a spark, a stubborn refusal to let the world take everything. Selena's day started before sunrise. By 6, she had moved through subway stations, dodged traffic, and navigated corners where danger could appear with a single step. Her eyes were always moving, scanning for threats, evaluating people, sensing who could be trusted. And trust, Selena had learned, was currency rarer than any coin in Manhattan. That night, she was in Harlem, laughing with friends, making a little money, and keeping herself safe. She noticed Derek Malone immediately when he stumbled into the bar. Rich, obviously out of place, fumbling with his drink, trying desperately to hide a part of himself that screamed, broken. He was transparent in a way most people weren't. And transparency in Selena's world was an opening. She didn't know his name, didn't care about his wealth. What caught her attention wasn't money. It was desperation. And desperation was dangerous. People like him usually tried to control others, to manipulate. But he wasn't manipulating. He was fumbling. The encounter had left her amused and secretly intrigued. Here was a man with everything in the world, yet he had nothing that truly mattered. She had seen rich men broken before, but Derek Malone seemed different. Vulnerable yet stubborn. Lost yet unwilling to admit it. Selena wasn't one to get involved with rich men, especially not men from towers of glass and gold. Too many had thought themselves entitled to her life, her body, her trust. But this was different. Something about him was genuine. And she made a mental note. Watch him, study him, understand what he wanted and why he wanted it. The streets were unforgiving. Selena had learned the rules early. You protect what you can, you hide what you must, and you never give away the parts of yourself that make you weak. But even as she walked the corners of Harlem, she felt a pull, a curiosity about a man she had barely met but already understood more than most men in her life would ever see. She wasn't naive. Selena knew the danger in interacting with someone like Derek. Power had its ways of crushing ordinary people, and she had seen it happen countless times. But she also knew that life was about seizing moments. And this, Derek Malone, this could be a moment, a test, a gamble. Her nights were long, filled with work, danger, and constant movement. By midnight, most people were asleep or safely tucked away. Selena, however, thrived when the city was awake and raw, when the alleys spoke stories of survival, and when she could test herself against the challenges of the night. She was no stranger to risk. But risk, she reminded herself, had rules. And men like Derek, wealth and ego layered thick, could be unpredictable. The next time she saw him, it was outside the bar, drenched slightly from a light rain. Hands shoved in his pockets, eyes scanning for her. He looked out of place, but not entirely clumsy. His presence commanded attention, though in a subtle way that made people around him uncomfortable without understanding why. Selena didn't approach. She stayed in the shadows, watching, assessing. He was different from the usual rich men who stumbled through Harlem. He wasn't looking to show off, to dominate, or to buy loyalty. He was searching, and that alone was enough to pique her interest. The city roared around them, cars honking, subway trains rattling underground. And yet in that moment, the world shrank to just him and her. Derek Malone, billionaire, untouchable to most, appeared like someone she could understand, vulnerable, honest, and just desperate enough to be real. As she slipped away into the night, disappearing into the maze of streets she called home, she wondered how long it would be before he realized the difference between wealth and real power. One night, she thought, one night could teach him more than all his doctors combined. But for now, she left him standing there, watching her retreat, curiosity burning in his chest. Derek Malone was already hooked, and Selena Royce was already planning her next move. The tension lingered, thick as the city fog, leaving the question hanging. What would happen when two worlds so different collided under the weight of desperation and desire? The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Derek Malone found himself wandering through Harlem again. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Her laughter, sharp and full of life, haunted him like a memory he hadn't had before. Every instinct he had, the ones built from years of power, money, and control, told him to leave her alone. But something inside him, something raw and unguarded, refused. He didn't know why he followed. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the faint hope that someone could see him as he truly was. Or maybe it was desperation. Derek had spent his life controlling outcomes, buying solutions, commanding results. And yet, with Selena Royce, he had no control. When he reached the bar, the neon lights reflected on puddles, shimmering like tiny galaxies scattered on the asphalt. The city felt alive, dangerous, and intoxicating all at once. And then he saw her. Selena. She was leaning against the wall outside, cigarette in hand, a half smile tugging at her lips as she watched the world move around her. She wasn't waiting for him, but he felt like she was expecting him. Her presence was magnetic, disarming, almost impossible to ignore. "Fancy man?" she said, not looking up at him, her voice casual but deliberate. "You following me now?" Derek froze, unsure of what to say. Most people would have scoffed, walked away, or been intimidated. He just stared. I'm just curious," he admitted, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. Selena finally looked at him. Her eyes were sharp, measuring, assessing. There was no fear, no flattery, no interest in his money. Just focus, just truth. Derek felt like he had been stripped bare. It was uncomfortable and exhilarating at the same time. "You curious?" she asked, flicking the cigarette and watching it hit the wet pavement. "Curious about what? My life, my problems? Or just about seeing if a rich guy can survive in the streets?" Derek swallowed. He wanted to answer honestly, but honesty wasn't something he had practiced in years. Finally, he said, I want to understand. I want to see things differently. Selena tilted her head, studying him like one might study a puzzle missing half its pieces. Most rich guys like you don't want to understand. You want control, but you're different. You're messy. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation. Derek felt both ashamed and relieved. Ashamed because she saw through him, relieved because for the first time in years, someone did. They walked together for blocks. No plan, no agenda, just moving through the streets, talking in ways Derek hadn't spoken in decades. She told him about her life, her survival, her scars, her victories small and big. He listened, captivated, realizing for the first time that connection had nothing to do with wealth or status. And then came the moment that changed everything. They ducked into an alley to avoid a sudden downpour, the city's noise muffled around them. For the first time, Derek wasn't trying to impress, wasn't trying to control, wasn't trying to fix himself with money or status. He was just human. Selena watched him closely, her hand brushing his arm almost by accident. There was no rush, no expectation, just presence. Derek felt a strange warmth, a kind of healing that no doctor, no procedure, no therapy session had ever given him. It was subtle, powerful, and terrifying. Time seemed to stretch. The rain pattered on the pavement. People passed, but none of it mattered. For the first time in years, Derek Malone didn't feel broken. And Selena Royce, the woman he barely knew, had no idea just how much power she had just by being herself. By the time they parted ways that night, Derek knew something irreversible had begun. He didn't fully understand it, and he didn't know what it would cost him, but he knew he would never see the city the same way again. And Selena? She walked away as confident as ever, unaware that a billionaire had just glimpsed a world he had never known, and that her life, too, had just taken a turn that neither of them could predict. The streets were quiet now except for the distant hum of the city. And in the shadows, Derek Malone stood frozen, heart racing, mind spinning. Selena studied him, searching for arrogance or false bravado. She found none. Derek Malone, the man who controlled the city skyline, the courts, the financial world, was finally powerless in the face of a human threat. And that vulnerability, strangely, made him stronger in her eyes. Meanwhile, the man from Selena's past was closer than either of them realized, watching, waiting. He had recognized Derek Malone for what he was, vulnerable emotionally, rich materially, and dangerously attached, and he intended to exploit every weakness. The next day, Derek faced ridicule at a business lunch. Colleagues whispered, eyes flicking to the news of his secret romance. Competitors smirked, seeing opportunity to undermine him. But Derek ignored them. His focus was singular, protecting Selena, understanding her, and ensuring that their connection survived. Selena, meanwhile, braced herself for the inevitable confrontation. She knew that the man from her past would make a move, and she needed to be ready. Every instinct told her to flee, but Derek's presence anchored her. He was not just an ally. He was a reason to stand, to fight, to risk for something real. As evening fell, Derek received a cryptic message, a single photo of Selena, alone, with a shadowed figure in the background. No words, just a warning. His heart raced. The game had escalated. This was no longer casual danger. This was personal. He called Selena immediately. Her voice, calm yet tense, reassured him. I know he's watching, but I can handle him, as long as you don't overstep. Derek realized then that this was a partnership unlike any he had ever known. Wealth, power, and influence could not solve these problems. Trust, courage, and vulnerability were now their only weapons. They met that night in a hidden loft, safe for now. Both were tense, aware that danger lurked in every shadow. Yet despite the fear, there was an undeniable electricity between them, a connection forged in adversity, in honesty, and in a shared need to survive. And as the city lights glimmered outside, the question remained, would their growing trust be enough to face the looming threat? Or would the shadows of Selena's past destroy the fragile hope they had just begun to build? The night was thick with rain and tension, as Derek Malone and Selena Royce moved through the streets side by side, shadows stretching across the wet pavement. Every step they took felt like walking on a tightrope. Derek had faced boardroom betrayals, hostile takeovers, and ruthless enemies, but this, the streets, the raw danger, the unknown, was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Selena led the way, her senses razor-sharp, alert to every movement, every sound. Derek followed, trusting her instincts in a way he had never trusted anyone. His wealth and influence meant nothing here. The rules of his world did not apply. They arrived at a secluded warehouse, a place Selena used as a safe house when threats from her past grew too close. Derek's pulse quickened. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew it would test him in ways that money, doctors, or even love had never done before. Inside, the shadows shifted. A figure stepped forward, a man from Selena's past. His eyes were cold, calculating, filled with the kind of malice Selena had encountered countless times, but now it was personal. He knew Derek was involved, and he intended to use that connection as leverage. "Nice of you to join us," the man said, voice low and threatening. "I've been waiting. Didn't think you'd risk yourself for her, Malone." Derek didn't flinch. He had faced dangerous people before, but none had ever threatened someone he cared about. "I'll protect her," he said simply. No bravado, no empty threats, just truth. Selena stepped forward, body tense, eyes fierce. "You won't touch him. Not now, not ever." The man smirked, underestimating Derek. But he hadn't counted on Derek's courage, or Selena's tenacity. Together they were unpredictable, a combination of street-smart instinct and calculated boldness. The confrontation escalated quickly. Derek had to think fast. He had no weapons, no backup, just himself and the resolve to protect Selena. His mind raced, analyzing exits, angles, and potential strategies. Selena moved with precision, guiding him subtly, making him aware of the immediate dangers, the weak points, the escape paths. Then the first blow landed. Not physical, but psychological. The man revealed details from Selena's past, secrets she had kept buried for years. Derek saw her flinch, but only briefly. She squared her shoulders, meeting both Derek's eyes and the threat head-on. "You think these secrets scare me?" she said. "They only make me stronger. You're the one who underestimates me." Derek realized then that the strength he admired in Selena wasn't just her survival. It was her defiance, her refusal to be crushed by her past, and that strength became his anchor. The standoff continued, tension building until finally, the man made his move. He lunged, aiming to strike, but Derek reacted instinctively, blocking and countering, protecting Selena. It was chaos, raw, and unrefined. But it worked. The man underestimated their coordination, their shared focus, their willingness to fight for each other. By the time the confrontation ended, the man was retreating, defeated, not physically destroyed, but exposed and humiliated. Derek and Selena stood side by side, breathing heavily, hearts pounding. The warehouse, once ominous, now felt like a crucible where their bond had been forged in fire. "You okay?" Derek asked, voice rough. Selena nodded, a small smile breaking through her tension. "Better than okay. We survived." And in that moment, Derek understood the depth of their connection. It wasn't about wealth, status, or desire. It was about trust, courage, and shared survival. The first major showdown had tested them, and they had emerged stronger, bound by experiences neither could ignore. Yet even in victory, the stakes remained high. They had survived tonight, but the city, the past, and the world's judgment were still waiting. And Derek realized that true love and protection required more than courage. It required constant vigilance. The night ended with them standing outside the warehouse, Rain slicked streets reflecting the city lights. Derek took Selena's hand, feeling a bond that was no longer just curiosity or attraction. It was trust, reliance, and a deepening emotional intimacy. The aftermath of the warehouse confrontation left Derek and Selena in a fragile but undeniable closeness. Derek had learned firsthand that Selena wasn't just a survivor. She was a force of nature, unyielding, fierce, and brilliantly human. And Selena had learned that beneath Derek's wealth and power was a man capable of vulnerability, loyalty, and courage. That morning, Derek invited Selena to his penthouse, not for luxury, but to provide a safe environment where they could regroup. She accepted cautiously, aware that the world outside was still dangerous, but trusting Derek enough to enter his domain. Inside, the penthouse felt different this time. The glass walls, the sweeping views, the modern furnishings, they were no longer barriers but a backdrop to a shared moment. Derek and Selena didn't speak at first. Words were unnecessary. Their eyes conveyed understanding, reassurance, and the weight of what they had survived together. Finally, Derek broke the silence. "I didn't know what I was missing," he admitted. "All these years I thought money, power, and control could fix me. But I was wrong. You showed me what I needed. Selena's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability flickering in her eyes. "And you showed me that even someone with everything can be broken, and that sometimes they need someone to just see them." They sat together, the city sprawling beneath them, reflecting in Derek's wide eyes. The penthouse felt like a temporary refuge, a place removed from judgment, ridicule, and threats. Here, they were just Derek and Selena, two people navigating the chaos of life and discovering strength in each other. The emotional healing deepened that night. Derek shared fears he had buried for decades, failures, disappointments, insecurities that no doctor or therapist had ever uncovered. Selena listened without judgment, her presence alone offering solace and courage. In turn, Selena shared the darkest corners of her past, the betrayals, the dangers, the choices that had shaped her. Derek didn't recoil. He didn't pity. He simply held her hand, silently promising that he would be different, that he would protect what mattered without trying to control or fix it. The night became a turning point. Their first physical intimacy had been the beginning, but this, emotional transparency, was the real transformation. Derek felt alive in a way he hadn't since childhood. Selena felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. And in that shared vulnerability, a bond was forged stronger than any steel or glass surrounding them. By sunrise, the penthouse was bathed in golden light. Derek and Selena stood side by side, watching Manhattan wake. They didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. Every glance, every touch, every shared breath told the story of two lives intersecting, of trust built in adversity, and of a connection neither wealth nor danger could sever. But even in this quiet moment, the world outside loomed. Derek knew that society, rivals, and Selena's past were still threats waiting for a misstep. And Selena knew that her life, though slightly safer in his presence, could never truly be predictable. They had survived the first major showdown, and their bond had deepened beyond attraction or curiosity. What they shared now was trust, understanding, and an unspoken promise to face the chaos of life together, no matter how fierce the storm. And yet the question lingered, heavy in the penthouse air. How long could they hold on to this fragile sanctuary before the outside world struck again? The first major battle had been won, and the emotional bond between them had solidified. But in a city like New York, peace was always temporary, and survival was never guaranteed. Manhattan's skyline gleamed like a crown, but beneath it, Derek Malone's world was unraveling in ways he had never imagined. The whispers that had started as subtle remarks among friends had transformed into a full-blown media storm. Social media feeds, gossip columns, and online forums buzzed with speculation about his relationship with Selena Royce. Billionaire Malone ditches high society for streetwise woman. read one headline. Another screamed, "Rich man's secret girlfriend. Who is she really?" The images weren't flattering. Blurred photos of Derek with Selena, smiles caught at awkward angles, shadows hiding the lines of their real moments. Yet the public dissected every detail as though it were evidence of scandal. Derek had faced hostile takeovers and lawsuits, but none of that compared to this. His empire could withstand market crashes and betrayal, but his reputation, carefully curated over decades, was now under siege. Friends and associates offered advice, veiled warnings wrapped in polite concern. "You're risking everything," they said. "Think carefully." Derek didn't answer them. How could he? He had discovered something money could never buy: connection, trust, and emotional intimacy. And he wasn't about to trade that for public approval. Selena, meanwhile, felt the weight of exposure pressing down on her. She had survived harsh streets and dangerous people, but she had never faced the relentless judgment of the masses. Every message, every comment online, every pointed glance in a public space reminded her of the gap between her world and Derek's. And yet, she refused to retreat. The couple tried to navigate the delicate balance between visibility and privacy. Derek arranged for secure transport, private entrances, and discreet meetings, but the cameras were relentless. Paparazzi loitered outside every building he entered. Drones hovered like mechanical vultures. Every step forward felt like a calculated risk. One evening, as Derek and Selena exited a theater quietly, a group of reporters confronted them. Flashbulbs fired. Questions shouted over one another. Derek shielded Selena instinctively, pushing her behind him. "Mr. Malone, are you really seeing this woman?" one reporter demanded. "Do you not care what society thinks?" Selena, ever defiant, stepped forward. "Society doesn't define me," she said firmly, "and it sure as hell doesn't define him." The room went silent for a moment. Derek looked at her, awe and pride mixing with anxiety. She had always been fearless, but this, the courage to confront the world publicly, was extraordinary. The confrontation ended without violence, but the headlines exploded the next morning. "Billionaire defended by streetwise girlfriend, a love story or a scandal." The media's obsession created tension in Derek's corporate world. Board members whispered, investors questioned, and competitors began to circle. Every meeting, every email, every phone call now carried an undercurrent of judgment and expectation. And the threats were far from over. The man from Selena's past had noticed the increased visibility. Where before he had operated in the shadows, now he saw an opportunity to strike. His warnings became bolder, messages more direct, each one hinting at the potential to destroy Derek's reputation. And worse, to hurt Selena. Selena sensed the escalation immediately. She shared the latest threats with Derek, who realized that their enemies were now leveraging both the streets and the boardroom. Their private moments, once safe, were no longer untouched by the outside world. "You can't protect me with money or influence alone," Selena said, voice tight with emotion. "If he wants to bring me down, he will find a way." Derek's jaw tightened. He had always solved problems with power and precision, but here, none of that mattered. The threat was emotional, psychological, and social, a level of danger he had never encountered before. And yet, the risk only strengthened his resolve. They began to work together strategically, using their combined instincts and resources. Derek leveraged discreet surveillance, private channels, and subtle misdirection. Selena drew on her streetwise experience, anticipating moves and outsmarting threats. They were a team, learning to navigate a world where both money and instinct were required. But the city never sleeps, and neither do the dangers lurking in shadows. One night, Derek returned to his penthouse to find a note slipped under his door. A single line. "You can't save her from me." The words hit like a punch. Derek realized that this wasn't just a test of love or trust. It was a challenge to his very ability to protect the one person who mattered more than power, wealth, or ego. And he knew that the game had only just begun. The next weeks were relentless. Every day brought new whispers, new headlines, new scrutiny. Derek Malone had built an empire on control and calculation, yet now he was powerless against public opinion and the lurking menace from Selena's past. In meetings, board members subtly questioned his judgment. "We can't have our CEO distracted," one said, carefully watching his reaction. "This could affect stock prices." Derek smiled politely, but inside, tension coiled like a snake. He knew the stakes weren't corporate. They were personal, emotional, and far more dangerous than any hostile takeover he had ever faced. Selena felt the strain as well. She had always been resilient, but the relentless pressure of visibility, judgment, and threats tested her limits. Every time they left the penthouse together, she scanned the crowds for hidden dangers, anticipating traps, calculating exits, and the man from her past was patient, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. One evening, Derek invited Selena to a quiet restaurant off the beaten path. The goal was simple: a few hours of privacy, a moment to breathe. But even here, the tension was palpable. Waiters glanced their way, strangers whispered, and the shadows seemed alive with unseen eyes. Derek reached across the table, holding her hand. "I know it's scary," he said quietly, "but we face this together. Whatever comes, we handle it as one." Selena looked at him, vulnerability flashing briefly in her eyes. "I've survived alone for so long," she admitted. "But now, I'm scared of failing you. Scared that I'll bring danger to your life." Derek squeezed her hand. "We'll adapt, we'll fight, and we'll survive. You're not alone anymore." Their bond deepened in that small, tense restaurant. Emotional intimacy became as crucial as physical safety. They shared fears, hopes, and strategies. Derek revealed the pressure he faced from his social circles, the judgment from friends and colleagues. Selena shared the subtle threats and intimidation from her past. And together, they began to see patterns, anticipate moves, and prepare for the next wave of danger. But the world outside their fragile bubble was relentless. Paparazzi tracked their every move, and online speculation turned into online harassment. The couple became a public obsession, scrutinized and dissected, with every gesture misinterpreted. Then, one morning, the first direct confrontation occurred. Derek arrived at the penthouse to find a stranger waiting in the lobby, a hired investigator, paid by the shadowy figure from Selena's past. The message was clear: surveillance, intimidation, and escalation. Derek realized that their enemies were no longer content with rumors and subtle threats. They wanted control, exposure, and leverage. And the moment had come where hiding and caution wouldn't be enough. Selena, ever vigilant, assessed the situation. "He wants us to panic," she said. "He wants us divided. We can't give him that. We have to be smarter, faster, stronger." And in that instant, Derek understood that the path forward wasn't about wealth, privilege, or reputation. It was about strategy, trust, and courage. They were no longer just two people in love. They were a unit, facing the escalating threats of both the public eye and the hidden shadows of Selena's past. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the skyline in blood-red tones, Derek and Selena stood together on the penthouse terrace, knowing the world was watching, judging, and waiting for them to falter. But they also knew something more important. As long as they had each other, no amount of exposure, ridicule, or threat could break them. Yet a question lingered in the air, heavy and unspoken. How long could they withstand the relentless pressure before the shadows caught up with them? The city had a way of making danger feel closer than it actually was. A subtle pressure in the air, a sense that someone somewhere was always watching. Derek Malone felt it the moment he stepped into his penthouse that evening. A chill ran down his spine, and Selena's instinct immediately registered the same tension. The front door had been forced. Not completely destroyed, but enough to announce intrusion. A calculated message. Papers scattered across the foyer, a chair tipped over, and most disturbingly, a single note left on the marble counter. "I've come for her, and nothing you own can stop me." Derek's first reaction was anger. He had faced enemies who had tried to dismantle his empire, but this felt different, personal, immediate. The note wasn't about money or business leverage, it was about Selena. And he realized, with a cold clarity, that he had underestimated the dangers from her past. Selena stepped forward, eyes scanning the apartment, muscles taut. "This isn't just intimidation," she said. "He knows we're here. He wants a confrontation, and he won't stop until he gets it." Derek, who had prided himself on control and preparation, suddenly felt a gnawing anxiety he hadn't felt since childhood. But alongside it was determination. He would protect Selena at all costs. Money, security systems, bodyguards, it all mattered. But now it was about courage and instinct. They barricaded the apartment doors, secured windows, and made plans for escape routes. Derek had never felt so powerless, yet so alive. Every shadow, every sound, every flicker of movement could be the threat materializing. And Derek knew that hesitation could be fatal. Hours passed. The city lights shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent to the tension inside. Derek and Selena moved in near-perfect sync, instinctively covering each other, communicating with glances and minimal words. Every creak of the floorboard, every distant siren felt amplified. Then it happened. A loud crash from the back balcony shattered the tense quiet. Derek reacted immediately, pulling Selena to cover. A figure emerged, a man from Selena's past, trained, determined, and ruthless. He had infiltrated the penthouse with a precision that spoke of obsession and experience. "You shouldn't have brought him into this world," the man said, voice cold and cutting. "This is your problem now." Selena stood tall, defiance flashing in her eyes. "You don't scare me, and you won't touch him." The confrontation escalated quickly. Derek, who had relied on planning and strategy in business, had to rely on instinct, adrenaline, and sheer willpower. Selena, experienced in survival and street combat, directed him silently, telling him when to move, when to duck, when to create openings. The fight was chaotic and raw. Furniture toppled, glass shattered, and every strike carried stakes far higher than money or reputation. Derek realized that strength wasn't just physical, it was emotional, mental, and tactical. And Selena's presence made him stronger, more focused, more alive. Finally, after a tense struggle, the intruder was forced into retreat, leaving a warning behind. "This isn't over. I'll find you again." The echo of the threat lingered long after he disappeared into the night. Derek and Selena sat together afterward, catching their breath. The apartment was a mess, but their bond had never felt more solid. Derek understood that the man had only intensified the reality. Survival required trust, courage, and an unbreakable partnership. "You okay?" Derek asked, still holding Selena close. "I've survived worse," she said. "But now, we're in this together. And you have to understand, this isn't something that ends tonight." Derek nodded, realizing that the fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. And in that understanding, a strange exhilaration mixed with fear. They were alive, they were connected, and nothing could break that connection unless they let it. The next day, Derek Malone woke with a pounding headache and a heightened awareness. The penthouse, though secure, no longer felt like a sanctuary. Every shadow outside, every passerby, every unusual sound could be a signal, warning that Selena's past was still very much present. Selena moved with confidence, but there was tension in her every motion. Her instincts were sharp, always scanning, always calculating. She had survived years of threats, betrayals, and violence, but now the stakes were higher. Derek's life, wealth, and influence were tied to her survival. One wrong move could destroy not just them, but everything Derek had built. They decided to leave the penthouse for the day, moving in a coordinated, careful manner through the streets of Manhattan. Derek was cautious, but Selena's streetwise instincts guided them. The city was alive around them, cars, pedestrians, distant sirens, but every corner could hide danger. Their destination was a secure safe house outside the city. Derek had arranged it, thinking distance would reduce risk. But Selena knew better. "Distance doesn't make danger disappear," she said. "We have to anticipate, outthink, and outmaneuver." As they exited a subway station, a black SUV slowed nearby. Derek noticed it immediately, but Selena's eyes sharpened. "They're watching," she whispered. The SUV followed for several blocks, and Derek realized that even wealth and security systems could not shield them from someone who had knowledge, patience, and persistence. Selena's past had claws, and it was relentless. When they finally reached the safe house, they found evidence that someone had been there before them. Signs of a break-in, subtle manipulations, a clear message. "I know where you hide." Derek's fear mixed with determination. He had faced high-stakes negotiations, corporate sabotage, and media scandals, but this personal human threat was different. It required not just wealth, but courage, trust, and action. Selena, despite the tension, remained composed. She began preparing defenses, mapping potential exits, and devising contingency plans. Derek watched, fascinated by her efficiency, strategy, and calm under pressure. Her past had shaped her into a master of survival, and now, he relied on her expertise more than ever. That evening, as they fortified the safe house, Derek and Selena shared a quiet moment. Derek admitted, "I've faced enemies my whole life, but none of them scared me like this, like losing you, like failing to protect you." Selena took his hand. "Fear is natural, but courage is choosing to face it anyway, and we're stronger together than apart." Their first night in the safe house was tense, punctuated by the distant hum of the city, shadows moving in unexpected corners, and every noise a potential threat. Derek realized that love and survival had become inseparable. Protecting Selena wasn't just about guarding her, it was about trusting her instincts, listening, learning, and sharing responsibility. As they finally settled, a message appeared on Derek's encrypted device, a photo of Selena from earlier in the day, taken from an unknown location. Attached. "I am closer than you think. You can't hide." The warning was clear. The threats were escalating, growing bolder and more personal. Derek and Selena knew that the next moves required perfect coordination, strategy, and trust. The slightest error could be catastrophic. And as they looked out at the city skyline, neon lights reflecting in their eyes, both understood one truth. Selena's past wasn't just a shadow, it was a storm, and they had only just begun to face its full fury. The city woke to chaos. Derek Malone's carefully curated public image, meticulous, polished, untouchable, was now under attack in ways he never anticipated. A viral video surfaced online, depicting him and Selena in what seemed like an intimate confrontation, taken completely out of context. Social media exploded with speculation, ridicule, and judgment. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire caught in shocking encounter with street woman," and "Derek Malone's reputation in tatters, who is Selena Royce?" The comment section was relentless, a battleground where strangers wielded opinions like weapons. Derek stared at the screen, disbelief mixed with frustration. His empire had weathered financial crises, hostile takeovers, and legal battles, but public humiliation, fueled by misinformation, cut deeper than any boardroom defeat. Selena sat beside him, calm but wary. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Once they smell scandal, the vultures circle. You have to be ready." Derek had always prided himself on control. He managed crises with precision, calculated moves, and strategic foresight. But this, intense, relentless, personal, was different. It wasn't just money at stake. It was reputation, trust, and the fragile bond he shared with Selena. Meanwhile, whispers circulated inside his company. Board members questioned his judgment. Some suggested he step back temporarily. Others hinted that his focus was compromised. Derek realized that the enemies he had underestimated were now operating in the open, leveraging public perception to weaken him from within. The personal attack became corporate when a rival executive subtly leaked misinformation about the company's dealings, tying Derek's alleged scandal to potential financial mismanagement. The stock dipped slightly, creating tension and panic among investors. Derek knew that his decisions now had repercussions beyond personal embarrassment. They affected thousands of employees, shareholders, and stakeholders. Despite the pressure, Derek and Selena leaned on each other. Their bond, forged in survival and trust, became a source of strength. Derek began coordinating a response, careful, strategic, and deliberate, while Selena used her street-smart instincts to identify the likely perpetrators behind the leaks and the viral videos. But just as they thought they had identified the first wave of threats, the unthinkable happened. A personal ambush. Derek returned to his car after a late-night board meeting, only to find the tires slashed, windows broken, and the interior vandalized. A message etched into the dashboard. "You can't control her, and you can't control us." Derek's heart pounded. This wasn't just public embarrassment. It was a direct, personal attack. And Selena, standing beside him, radiated a calm intensity that reassured him even as fear clutched at his chest. "Someone wants to scare you," she said. "But this is also a message for me. They're testing how far we'll go to protect each other." Derek realized that the public scandal, boardroom betrayal, and personal ambush were connected. The people who sought to harm them understood that attacking reputation alone wasn't enough. They needed to destabilize them emotionally, psychologically, and strategically. And yet, as dangerous as the situation was, Derek felt something unfamiliar. Focus. Purpose. A determination to fight not just for wealth or status, but for the woman who had restored his confidence, courage, and ability to feel deeply again. As the rain began to fall, the city's lights blurred through the haze, reflecting the turbulence in Derek's life. One thing was certain: the stakes had never been higher, and failure was no longer an option. The morning after the ambush, Derek and Selena moved like predators themselves, alert, calculated, and aware of every possible threat. Every shadow on the street, every passerby's glance, every unusual sound could signal danger. Manhattan, in all its vibrant chaos, had become a high-stakes chessboard. Selena led the way through discreet back alleys and hidden entrances, teaching Derek to trust instincts over intuition. He had relied on meticulous planning all his life, but she showed him how to read energy, body language, and subtle environmental cues, a skill Derek realized was indispensable. The threat wasn't just anonymous anymore. The same man from Selena's past who had attacked the penthouse and orchestrated previous intimidation had escalated. He had hired specialists, stalkers, and manipulators to destabilize their lives. Derek realized they weren't just targets. They were trophies to be broken. Their destination that morning was a secluded warehouse in Brooklyn. Selena had discovered intelligence suggesting the group's next move would be staged there. Derek was hesitant. He had faced danger before, but this wasn't business. This was raw, unpredictable, and deeply personal. As they approached the location, a sense of tension settled over them like a heavy blanket. Derek felt his heartbeat accelerate, not from fear alone, but from anticipation, adrenaline, and the weight of responsibility. Selena noticed, and without a word took his hand, grounding him. Inside the warehouse, the shadows shifted ominously. Figures emerged from hidden corners, armed, organized, and patient. Derek's initial impulse was panic, but Selena's voice cut through the tension. "Stay calm. Observe. Move as one. Trust me." The ambush began. Derek and Selena fought side by side, every movement instinctive, synchronized, a combination of raw strength and strategic thinking. Derek had never experienced such fear, adrenaline, and exhilaration in his life. He realized that survival wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, and relational. During the struggle, Derek protected Selena multiple times, instinctively putting himself in harm's way. And Selena, using every skill she had learned on the streets, neutralize threats before they could escalate. Together, they were a unit, an unstoppable combination of courage, trust, and calculated action. Midway through the confrontation, the leader of the group revealed himself, the man from Selena's past. His eyes burned with obsession and anger, and he taunted them. "You think you're prepared? You think you can survive this?" Selena stepped forward, defiant. "We've survived worse, and we're not afraid of you." The showdown intensified with narrow escapes, close calls, and moments where defeat seemed imminent. Derek realized that his impotence, emotional, psychological, and even physical in past years, wasn't an issue anymore. His connection with Selena had reignited a courage he hadn't known existed. Finally, after a grueling, chaotic struggle, the intruders were forced into retreat. Derek and Selena stood, breathing heavily, bruised but triumphant. Their victory wasn't just physical, it was emotional, psychological, and symbolic. They had faced the culmination of threats from Selena's past and emerged stronger. Yet even in victory, the stakes remained high. Derek and Selena understood that public scrutiny, boardroom betrayal, and shadowy enemies would continue to test them. The city was alive, watching, and judging, and they had only survived because they trusted each other completely. As they left the warehouse, drenched in rain and adrenaline, Derek looked at Selena with awe. "I've never known courage like this," he said. "And I've never trusted anyone like this," she replied. In that moment, they weren't just surviving. They were learning to thrive together, to face challenges that no money, status, or power could prepare them for. The ambush had changed them, forged their bond, and taught them that their strength lay not in isolation, but in unity, trust, and unshakable connection. Manhattan had never felt so tense. Derek Malone could feel it in the sharp, biting wind that swept through the streets, in the restless hum of traffic, and in the way every shadow seemed to move with intention. This wasn't just a city anymore. It was a battlefield. Every step he took with Selena at his side carried consequences far beyond his previous comprehension. The threats that had shadowed them for weeks had escalated into something more personal. A package had arrived at Derek's penthouse earlier that morning, an envelope marked with Selena's name, inside containing photographs, letters, and detailed accounts of her past that she had never shared with him. It was a calculated move to test their trust and force Derek to doubt Selena. Derek read the contents with a mixture of fury, fear, and confusion. Each piece was designed to manipulate him, to suggest deception, and to challenge his loyalty. It worked. For a brief moment, he questioned whether he truly knew the woman who had healed him. But then he looked at Selena, standing calmly across the room, and he realized the truth. This was a test, not of her honesty, but of their resilience. Selena sensed his doubt. "I didn't ask for this life," she said quietly. "I've done what I had to survive. And now, we face the consequences together. If you can't trust me, then we've already lost." Derek swallowed hard, acknowledging the weight of her words. Trust had never been easy for him. Not in business, not in relationships, and certainly not in a world where money and power had always defined his interactions. But with Selena, he realized, trust was essential. Without it, their bond was meaningless. As night fell, they prepared for confrontation. Derek's penthouse, usually a symbol of control and luxury, became a strategic command center. Maps, surveillance feeds, and secure communications lined the walls. Every move they made was calculated, designed to anticipate threats before they could strike. And then it happened. An attempt on their lives came suddenly. A coordinated assault designed to separate them and test their limits. Armed figures surrounded the building, cutting off exits while distractions attempted to lure Derek and Selena into traps. But their partnership was flawless. Derek protected Selena instinctively, while she directed them through escape routes and countermoves with precision. Every decision, every reaction, every gesture demonstrated how far their trust had deepened under pressure. In the chaos, Derek realized something crucial. Survival wasn't just about wealth, power, or physical strength. It was about unity, loyalty, and the courage to face fear without hesitation. Selena had taught him that. And now, on the edge of danger, he understood that their bond was more powerful than any enemy, any betrayal, or any challenge. By the time the attackers were repelled, Derek and Selena were battered, but unbroken. Their victory was not just physical, it was emotional and psychological. They had tested their loyalty, survived deception, and faced life-altering decisions together. And in the silence that followed, they understood that the fight had changed them, forging an unbreakable partnership. Yet, even as they caught their breath, Derek couldn't shake a lingering thought. The threats were far from over, and the next challenge would demand even more than they had already given. The aftermath of the ambush left Derek and Selena exhausted but resolute. Manhattan's skyline glowed like a battlefield's aftermath, but the city was indifferent to their struggle. It didn't care about their survival, their victories, or their bond. It carried on, oblivious, a constant reminder that the world wouldn't pause for anyone. Selena had retreated to a secure room within the penthouse, reviewing every detail of their recent threats. She needed to anticipate every possible move from their enemies, who had shown an unsettling ability to adapt. Derek, meanwhile, reflected on the decisions that had led them here. Every choice, every act of trust, every risk had brought them closer together. But it also meant that failure could cost them everything. The couple faced a critical question. How far were they willing to go to protect each other? Derek knew that resources alone would not suffice. Empathy, strategy, and instinct were equally necessary. He had always solved problems with money and influence, but now, the stakes required personal sacrifice, courage, and vulnerability. A message arrived on a secure channel, unmistakably from their primary adversary. It wasn't a threat this time. It was an ultimatum. They could leave the city and abandon everything Derek had built, or risk public exposure, corporate ruin, and personal harm. Derek felt a surge of anger and fear, but Selena's calm presence grounded him. "We don't run," she said. "We face this. Together, whatever it takes." The decision was life-altering. Leaving Manhattan meant relinquishing control, surrendering to fear, and abandoning the empire Derek had built from the ground up. Staying meant confronting dangers that had already proven lethal and unpredictable. But there was no hesitation in their shared resolve. They would stay. Preparation became their mantra. They reinforced the penthouse, coordinated escape routes, and devised contingencies for every scenario. Derek, who had spent decades relying on power and calculation, now relied on trust and instinct alongside Selena. The partnership was evolving from protection to empowerment. The night before the planned confrontation, Derek and Selena sat together on the rooftop terrace, city lights reflecting in their eyes. Derek broke the silence. "I've controlled everything in my life. My company, my image, even my relationships. But with you, control doesn't matter. Trust does. Courage does. Connection does." Selena nodded, her gaze steady. "I've survived alone for too long, but with you, I've learned that strength comes from partnership, from leaning on each other, from facing fear together." Their conversation was interrupted by an unexpected sound, a helicopter hovering nearby, spotlights scanning the penthouse. The enemy was closing in, and the next move would test everything they had learned. Every lesson, every instinct, every ounce of courage would be needed to face the approaching threat. Derek and Selena exchanged a glance that said more than words could. There was fear, yes, but also determination. This was the moment where decisions mattered, where trust would be tested, and where the outcome would shape the rest of their lives. And as they braced for the confrontation, Derek realized the profound truth. The fight wasn't just about survival or protection. It was about love, loyalty, and the courage to face the unknown together. The Brooklyn waterfront was deserted, mist curling over the pier. The only sound the lapping of water against rusted metal and the distant hum of traffic. Derek Malone's limousine had dropped them off on the far end, far enough to stay unnoticed until the confrontation began. This was it, the culmination of weeks of threats, betrayals, and danger. Selena's eyes were sharp, scanning every shadow, every angle, every potential ambush. Derek felt a strange combination of dread and adrenaline. For the first time in his life, wealth and power meant little compared to survival, trust, and the woman beside him. The adversary who had haunted Selena's past stepped out of the fog. His movements were precise, confident, predatory. Every calculated strike and threat had led to this single moment. He smirked, clearly believing he had control. "You think you've survived this long by chance?" he taunted. "You're in my world now, and no one leaves unscathed." Selena stepped forward, her stance unwavering. "Your world ended the moment you threatened him and tried to control me." Derek felt a surge of protectiveness and clarity. Every hesitation, every self-doubt he had carried for years evaporated. He wasn't just defending wealth or ego. He was defending the only person who had healed him, the person who had forced him to feel again. The confrontation was chaotic but precise. Derek and Selena moved as one, instincts and trust guiding every step. Shots rang out from distant corners, but neither hesitated. They had prepared for every eventuality, anticipated every ambush, and now executed a plan born from survival and mutual reliance. During the struggle, Derek discovered a hidden truth. The adversary's power came not from physical strength alone, but from manipulation, deception, and fear. Selena had faced him before, but she needed Derek's courage to turn the tide. Together they used both brains and brawn, combining strategy with instinct. At the climax of the showdown, the adversary was cornered, unarmed, and desperate. Selena revealed the final secret he hadn't anticipated. His network of hired threats had been dismantled, his allies had abandoned him, and Derek's resources had exposed every layer of deception. "You underestimated us," Selena said. Her voice was cold, unwavering. "This ends now." The man lunged one final time, but Derek intercepted, holding him off while Selena disarmed him completely. In that moment, Derek realized the full extent of what Selena had done for him. Not just protection, not just survival, but the rekindling of courage, confidence, and trust. No golden light across the skyline and reflecting off Derek Malone's penthouse windows. For the first time in months, the city felt alive in a new way, not as a battlefield, not as a threat-laden maze, but as a place of possibility, hope, and renewal. Derek and Selena sat on the rooftop terrace, hands entwined, hearts still racing from the final confrontation. The chaos, fear, and danger of the past weeks had given way to something rare: clarity. Their bond, tested under extreme pressure, had emerged stronger, resilient, and unshakable. Derek turned to Selena. "I've spent my life controlling everything: money, business, appearances. But none of it mattered until you showed me what real trust and courage are. You didn't just heal me physically. You healed something deeper." Selena smiled softly. "And you taught me that partnership can exist without compromise, that two people can face the world together and still be themselves. We've both changed, and it's because we trusted each other when everything else was collapsing." The city below pulsed with energy. Derek realized that he no longer needed to fear the opinions of strangers, the rumors, or even the enemies that had hunted them. Their shared experience had created a fortress of mutual understanding, resilience, and love. In the weeks following the showdown, Derek leveraged his influence not for revenge, but for restoration. Board members who had questioned him were replaced by trusted allies who valued integrity over manipulation. The media scandal faded, replaced by stories highlighting resilience, courage, and redemption. Derek and Selena had turned chaos into empowerment. Selena reconnected with her past, not to dwell on trauma, but to confront it, sever lingering threats, and reclaim her narrative. Derek supported her every step, reinforcing the lesson that true power came from unity, empathy, and courage. One evening, As the city skyline glittered behind them, Derek spoke again. I used to believe that happiness could be bought or controlled. Now I know it can't. It comes from connection, trust, and moments like this, real, raw, and ours. Selena leaned against him. And we'll keep building on that. No threats, no judgments. Nothing from the past can take this away. We've survived everything the world threw at us, and we're stronger for it. The final revelation came not from a dramatic twist, but from quiet understanding. Derek and Selena had both faced their fears, confronted betrayal, and survived extreme danger. The healing had been mutual, healing of body, heart, and spirit. As dawn broke fully over Manhattan, Derek realized that wealth, power, and status were meaningless compared to the courage to love and trust without reservation. Selena, once vulnerable and alone, had transformed into a partner, equal in strength, instinct, and resilience. They stayed on the rooftop, watching the city wake. There was no applause, no celebration, only the quiet affirmation of survival and connection. And in that silence, Derek understood the final truth. The billionaire who had been failed by 100 doctors had found healing, trust, and courage in a woman the world had overlooked. The story didn't end in perfection. It ended in authenticity. Raw, unfiltered, and real. Derek and Selena's lives would continue to be tested, but the lessons were clear. Trust in each other, face fear head-on, and value connection over power. That was the victory no money could buy. As the morning sun painted the skyline gold, they held each other, knowing that whatever storms came next, they had already endured the fiercest together. The city stretched before them, dangerous, unpredictable, alive, and so were they. Together. Comment below. What would you do if you were in Derek's shoes? Could you trust someone completely after betrayal? I want to hear your thoughts. Like this video, if you felt every twist, every betrayal, and every moment of courage in this story. Your support helps me bring more real, emotional, and controversial stories straight to you. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our next top core story, because trust me, the next one will shock you even more.